I believe we don't have any other agencies right now who want to weigh in. I would like to go to Auditor-Controller Paz Dominguez. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair Fennell, for the opportunity to speak. I have prepared a statement and a presentation. May I please have your permission to share my screen so that the viewers can follow along?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. In consideration of our deaf and hard of hearing community members, plentiful text is included with this presentation so that those community members have an equitable opportunity to receive this information in real time. I have read the report written by the County Administrative Office and presented by Supervisor Bass and Supervisor Bohn. I have read it several times over this past weekend after learning about it at the end of the day this past Friday, November 20th. I compared the information in the staff report with the information that exists in our financial records as well as documented communications. Upon review, it is evident that the staff report contains erroneous information. In the interest of ensuring integrity, transparency, and accountability to the residents and taxpayers of this county, I will identify critical areas where the staff report is erroneous and provide true and accurate information accompanied with evidence to substantiate my claims. I will also include solutions. Should this presentation be silenced, as has been my experience in prior instances of communicating to this board, the public may still access the information contained herein as it will be published on the Auditor-Controller's webpage as well as distributed to media outlets. To begin, Government Code 26881 says the county auditor, or in counties that have the Office of Controller, the Auditor-Controller shall be the Chief Accounting Officer of the county. Upon order of the Board of Supervisors, the Auditor or Auditor-Controller shall prescribe and shall exercise a general supervision, including the ability to review departmental and county-wide internal controls over the accounting forms and the method of keeping the accounts of all offices, departments, and institutions under the control of the Board of Supervisors and of all districts whose funds are kept in the county treasury. The erroneous information in paragraph 2 of the staff report says that the operational gaps are created by the Auditor-Controller's office. The true and correct information is that the Auditor-Controller does not have the authority to award itself additional staffing allocations to fill operational gaps, nor would it eliminate positions to create operational gaps. Throughout the years, former Auditor-Controllers have expressed to the Board of Supervisors that additional staffing was required to address current and future operational gaps. Upon review of the Office of the Auditor-Controller's task list, functions, and operations, 2 different and independent entities found that staffing in the Auditor-Controller department is insufficient to meet its current needs. The first entity is the Humboldt County Civil Grand Jury. I've included a link in my presentation that leads you right to that document. And you will find on page 17 that their recommendation is that the Humboldt County Civil Grand Jury recommends that the Board of Supervisors ensure that the Auditor-Controller's office is fully funded so that the staffing and functions of the office can be fulfilled with due diligence. This should be completed by January 15th, 2020. Craig Goodman, CPA. I've included a link to his report as well. The recommendation he made on page 12 of his report. I recommend, upon the completion of the Cooperative Personnel Services Staffing Review, that the CAO revisit the Auditor-Controller's budget to guarantee that sufficient appropriations are provided to the Auditor-Controller to perform the duties of the Controller. The authority and the responsibility for the operational gaps. Per California Government Code 26884, in the event the Board of Supervisors elects to require that the County Auditor-Controller perform the additional services authorized by this chapter, which include 26881, that was extra, it shall have the power and it shall be its duty to provide by proper appropriations for any additional personnel, equipment, supplies, or expenses made necessary thereby. The solution to fill the operational gaps. In order to fill the operational gaps and prevent immediate future operational gaps in the Office of the Auditor-Controller resulting from the implementation of GASB 87 to track and record leases, the Board of Supervisors should provide sufficient appropriations for additional personnel, equipment, supplies, and expenses. To accomplish this without generating additional costs to the taxpayers, the Board can re-examine its county-wide distribution of fiscal and finance staff and redirect those positions to the Auditor-Controller Department, as it is the only central service department that is qualified and authorized to perform county finance administrative functions. Those redirected positions would continue to be funded as they currently are by federal and state grants. Given the Auditor-Controller Department's expertise in the cost plan, the charges to those grants would be fully substantiated. The permanent personnel positions needed is an assistant auditor-controller or a deputy auditor-controller, a supervising accountant, an accountant auditor, and an executive secretary. Erroneous information in the staff report regarding the 1920 cost plan is that the negotiation agreement contains language approving the central service costs and the internal service costs. The true and correct information is that the negotiation agreement formally approves only the overhead and support service costs listed in the summary schedule, also known as Section 1. Section 1 includes only central service departments and does not include any internal service fund costs. Internal service funds, ISFs, are included in Section 2, and the negotiation agreement explains that those costs should be billed or cost applied within the limitation that such charges will be based on the actual allowable costs as defined by uniform guidance, incurred by the cost center responsible for providing the service. The State Controller's Office did not approve the internal service fund costs through the negotiation agreement because given the date of their approval, which was May 6, 2020, the actual allowable costs for fiscal year 1920 were not yet known as the year was not complete. ISFs have elected to direct bill based on current year budgeted amounts and not based upon actual costs as required. Further, the State Controller's approval is predicated on the condition that the information provided and used as the basis for acceptance of the amounts is not subsequently found to be materially incomplete or inaccurate. Subsequent to the State Controller's approval, I have found the charges to be materially incomplete or inaccurate. The evidence. On the following two slides is the backup that I have received from from the County Administrative Office to substantiate charges for the ISFs. All charges are based upon estimates and forecasts in direct contradiction to and in non-compliance of Code Section 200.430 I-1-8 of the Uniform Guidance. In addition, I have not received any of the requested time reports to substantiate actual level of effort in accordance with Code Section 200.430 I-3 of the Uniform Guidance. This is the document that was submitted to me in order for to propose that I post these charges to departments. I've highlighted the areas where you can see that they are all estimated charges. For some of the ISFs, this is the only document that was submitted. There is no time report. There is no evidence that it costs this much money to provide services to these specific departments. It is purely based on estimates. I received this document from the purchasing ISF. I've also highlighted the charges they've proposed that I post. They are forecasted charges as well, not based on actual level of effort. The authority. The Office of Management and Budget Uniform Guidance 2 CFR 200. That first section that I brought up, 200.430, budget estimates alone do not qualify as support for charges to federal awards, but may be used for interim accounting. The next one In accordance with the Department of Labor regulations implementing the Fair Labor Standards Act, charges for the salaries and wages of non-exempt employees, in addition to the supporting documentation described in this section, must also be supported by records indicating the total number of hours worked each day. California Government Code 25260, I've truncated it. The Board of Supervisors may by resolution create one or more working capital funds. Each working capital fund may be used to finance internal service activities rendered to the various departments. All funds created pursuant to this section shall be accounted for as prescribed by the county auditor or controller. Additional erroneous information regarding the 1920 cost plan: that an independent third-party review of the charges by a reputable consulting firm has affirmed that the unposted cost plan charges are legally compliant and are consistent with industry standards. The true and correct information is that the reputable consulting firm, MGO, did not attest or express an opinion that the cost plan's ISF charges are legally compliant and are consistent with industry standards. The evidence is the disclaimer on page 7 of the report. The observations and recommendations reported do not constitute an examination made in accordance with attestation standards, the objective of which would be to express an opinion or conclusion. Respectively, MGO does not express such an opinion. The sufficiency of the limited study is solely the responsibility of the County of Humboldt. MGO makes no representation regarding the sufficiency of the procedures performed to disclose all significant matters or reveal errors in the underlying information, instances of fraud, or illegal acts, if any. MGO has no obligation to update this memo or to revise the information contained herein to reflect events and transactions occurring subsequent to the date of this memo. Their memo is intended solely for the information for management of the County of Humboldt and is not intended to be and should not be used by anyone other than the specified party. It should also be noted that it is a very one-sided report relying only on interviews with the CAO's office. No interviews were held with the Auditor-Controller's office in the formation of this study or report. Additional erroneous information regarding the 1920 cost plan: that the general fund, the county's best source of funding for local needs, would be that savings account for ADA and the other funds listed above. Due to the county's strong financial stewardship in the past, this transfer would be possible, but it is highly unusual and terribly unsustainable. In effect, Humboldt County would be subsidizing the state and federal governments and losing out on $14.2 million for local needs if this came to pass. The true and correct information is that evidenced by multiple repeat audit findings and identifying material weaknesses in internal controls over financial information and imbalanced budgets for over a decade, the County of Humboldt did not enjoy strong financial stewardship in the past. It is not highly unusual that a county would fund an internal service fund such as ADA. Further, the County of Humboldt would not be subsidizing the state and federal government for its ADA costs because it is the sole responsibility of the County of Humboldt to adhere to ADA requirements. The county is not automatically entitled to federal and state reimbursements for complying with federal mandates or its consent decree ordering compliance with the ADA. Evidence: you can find all of the audit reports dating back to 2005 published at our website and also through this link. California Government Code 25260 says, in full mode, the Board of Supervisors may by resolution create one or more working capital funds. The board may make available such amounts as are necessary to establish each fund and to maintain its solvency. At the beginning of any fiscal year, the board may provide by resolution for the transfer of any or all of the monies in any fund created pursuant to this section or for the abolishment of any such fund. Each working capital fund may be used to finance internal service activities rendered to the various departments and agencies of the county or to the districts governed by the Board of Supervisors, or to finance those activities performed by the county for any local government agency by agreement with the governing body of such agency. The fund may finance equipment, materials, supplies, services, and all expenses incurred in establishing and operating the service activities. The board may provide for the fixing and collection of charges from the recipients of activities financed by the fund, and such charges may include all expense in providing the service activity, including operational cost and depreciation. All funds created pursuant to this section shall be accounted for as prescribed by the county auditor or controller. It should be noted that nowhere in this government code that authorizes the formation of internal service fund does it say that it will be financed by federal and state programs. There's a potential solution to justify the posting of the ISF 1920 charges. This is one potential solution. To justify the posting of the remaining ISF's 1920 charges and be compliant with federal regulations governing allowable costs, the ISFs can correct their billing methodology to one that is substantiated by actual expenses and actual level of effort. That actual level of effort will need to be substantiated with time reports in accordance with Department of Labor regulations implementing the Fair Labor Standards Act. A second potential solution is that to justify the posting of the remaining ISF's 1920 charges and be compliant with federal regulations governing allowable costs, the departments that receive federal grants can request written approval from that cognizant agency of substitute systems for allocating salaries that don't require time reports of daily hour counts. Per Section 200.430 I-5 of the Uniform Guidance, such substitute systems may include, but are not limited to, random moment sampling, rolling time studies, case counts, or other quantifiable measures of work performed. I will take a minute now to describe why it is misleading to say that we are going to lose $14.2 million if these charges aren't posted, because I will remind that they are not substantiated and we don't know that number to be true. I will use an example for me. I budgeted $50,000 to buy cubicles last year. I was able to get them for $20,000. I didn't pay another $30,000 only because I budgeted for it. Similarly, I could budget that I'm going to receive $14 million from the state. But unless I've actually provided a service to the state valued at $14 million, the state will never pay me, and I will never be entitled to that money. Regarding the 2021 cost plan, the staff report suggests that the Office of the Auditor-Controller was capable of submitting the 2021 cost plan by the due date of December 31st, 2019. The County Administrative Office is well aware that timely submittal was not possible due to their delayed submission of passable information that the State Controller would accept to allow the CAO's 1920 proposed charges to departments for retirement costs, also known as PARs. The CAO's delayed submission of that passable information for 1920 resulted in delayed opportunity to prepare and submit the 2021 cost plan by the deadline. The State Controller approved the 1920 cost plan in May of 2020. Given that the pandemic was well underway during the summer of 2020, the completion of the cost plan has progressed slowly. Contrary to the presumption in the staff report that work has not begun to complete the cost plan for 21-22, the AC office has compiled as much of the relevant information as possible and has forwarded it to the external consultant that prepares the cost plan. The items that we are still waiting on are listed below in order to complete 2021. The information has been requested several times and has yet to be submitted. We are waiting for Public Works and the ADA division of the CAO department to provide us 1819 building square footage. We are waiting for HR to provide us 1819 personnel requisitions. And we are waiting for all internal service funds to provide us time reports for fiscal year 1819. We cannot complete the cost plan until we receive these documents from these departments. regarding closing the books for fiscal year 1920. Several significant items that require posting in 1920 were brought to our attention well after June 30th, 2020. To date, we continue to receive invoices that are 1 or 2 years old. We are informed of errors in fiscal year 1920 that require the unposting and reposting of previously reconciled transactions. When this happens, reconciliations must occur again, thus delaying the year-end further. Most notably, we were notified of 2 significant items in the last month. 1, IHSS raises incurred in October 2019 by the county have yet to be paid out. We were notified of this 2 weeks ago. Erroneous $3 million payroll charge occurred in December 2019 to the DHHS fund for 1 employee that required the transfer of the charge to the general fund. We were notified of this last month. In addition to subsequently learning about prior year corrections, we are also in the middle of a declared state of emergency and uncontrolled pandemic that has certainly impacted our operations as well as those of departments and special districts. We have had 2 accountants go out on leave as a result, and 1 of our senior fiscals move out of Humboldt County. Our extra help employee accepted a permanent position in another department because he could not pass up the opportunity for health insurance and better pay. We have no resources to make a counteroffer and retain staff. It has taken us the past 4 to 5 months to train new staff, and we are starting to see faster progress. Several items also delayed our closing of the 1920 books. County IT required our assistance in testing, training, and implementing the county's upgraded financial software by August 3rd, 2020. This was a years-long project that split our staff's attention and energies both pre- and post-implementation. We still regularly troubleshoot with IT and other departments and are frequently requested to provide trainings. Your board requested that I pull away from my department's duties to assist HR, Treasurer, Tax Collector, and CAO departments with a GL mapping document a second time while I was working on year end. In order to assist my department in catching up on the entry backlog left behind by departed staff throughout the pandemic, I had to direct my focus to learning data storage and table data. I built import templates to assist with the postings of current deposits, wire transfers, invoices, special district claims, and budget updates. Board items concerning my department have been scheduled numerous times without consideration of my schedule, exactly like this last-minute special meeting held on what would have finally been a day off that pull me away from my scheduled tasks. In order for us to close the books, we need departments to stop submitting non-urgent requests described to us as urgent. Departments to submit claims and journal entries complete with backup and relevant authorization. Your board to stop interfering with the operations of our independently elected office by scheduling meetings without consideration of our schedules and by attempting to direct our actions. The County Administrative Office to stop interfering with our operations by undermining our authority and contradicting our messaging to other departments. The County Council Office and the Human Resources Department to stop interfering with our operations by repeatedly pulling our staff away from their duties for hours at a time to participate in unwarranted investigations, and for all requesters to honor our deadlines and schedules. Erroneous information provided in that staff report regarding cash and investment reconciliation. Cash and investment accounts have not been reconciled in accordance with Government Code Section 26905 since last fall. The true and accurate information is that this county has not reconciled its cash and investment accounts in accordance with Government Code Section 26905 for several years now, since before I was employed by the county. The CAO has just recently started submitting bank statements to us for the external PARS account. This incomplete task has earned the county an audit finding for years, not just since last fall. I alerted all departments of this at least once a year for 3 years. Evidence. Same reports referenced in the first correction, the grand jury, Craig Goodman, and including our external auditors. For example, in fiscal year 2016-17, before my employment with the county's external auditors wrote the following finding. While performing audit procedures over cash, we noted a $2 million discrepancy between the general ledger, the bank statements, and other supporting documentation. Through inquiries and further review, we noted that the bank balance reported on February 16, 2016 Treasurer's Daily Report was understated by $2 million. The discrepancy was a result of failing to update the Treasurer's Daily Report for a transfer of $2 million from an investment account to the cash account ledger. The error was not detected for several months due to the extended period of time before the Treasurer's Daily Report was reviewed. Solutions to reconcile cash in accordance with Government Code Section 26905. The list I'm about to provide you is what would need to happen in order for my office to be compliant with this government code. Please keep in mind that I am not the one recommending that my office immediately become compliant with this government code. Since, number one, since cash must be reconciled by the last day of each month for the preceding month, departments would need to finalize all of their posting for a month by the 15th of the following month. For example, that means we stop accepting claims for July payments and journals for July postings by August 15th. I will expect that the Board of Supervisors will direct departments, special districts, and schools districts to comply with this at a great burden to their operations. 2. Since I have no remaining staff to delegate this task to, I will either need an additional accounting position or I will need to do it myself and cease performing all of my other tasks. Note that the senior accountant who is assigned this task has been on extended leave since mid-August and has extended that leave 3 times with an expected return date of mid-December. In order to fully comply with a complete cash and investment reconciliation, we need the treasurer to provide us all deposits in a timely manner. As of today, November 23, 2020, we have received deposits through November 10, 2020. In order to fully comply with a complete cash and investment reconciliation, we need the treasurer to clear cash checks in a timely manner. As of today, November 23, 2020, checks have been cleared as cashed through August 25, 2020. In order to fully comply with a complete investment reconciliation, we need the treasurer to report investment valuations at cost, not at market. Additional solutions. In order to fully comply with a complete investment reconciliation, we need the CAO to submit to us complete bank statements for PARs every month within the first 5 days of the following month. We would need all departments with external bank accounts to submit bank statements to us within the first 5 days of the following month. We need all departments with petty cash to submit to us certified petty cash counts within the first 5 days of the following month. We need the treasurer to submit to us all investment bank statements within the first 5 days of the following month. In order to fully comply with a complete cash and investment reconciliation, the County of Humboldt will need to switch to a pooled cash method of tracking and maintaining cash. This would require that funds no longer have cash, but instead claims on cash. That will allow for the 1-to-1 reconciliation of deposits made at the bank instead of the 1 to 500 reconciliation for deposits posted to all the different funds. Erroneous information included in that staff report regarding, in the labor negotiations section, is we do not know whether the auditor will move $1.3 million of interest earnings to the general fund as required by state law. The true and accurate information regarding this commentary in the labor negotiation section is that the CAO has historically requested redirected interest earnings to the general fund from other funds that did not belong to the general fund, and in some cases to the county. Contrary to the suggestion of the erroneous information, the CAO is not entitled to the interest earnings of other funds, and state law does not require that I give the CAO somebody else's interest earnings. A complete investigation of the funds whose interest is being redirected was begun but not completed due to limited staffing capacity and refocused priorities of greater urgency. The AC office did hold interviews with county departments whose interest was being redirected and received requests to stop the redirecting of the money. Given the short time frame from when I was notified of this agenda item and the date of this presentation, I did not have enough time to prepare a completed document for evidence. However, I will share on the next slide the interest apportionment work paper prepared from what we receive from the treasurer. The authority, California Government Code 53647B, notwithstanding the provisions of Subdivision A, and except as otherwise represented by the officer making the deposit so directs, such interest shall be paid to the fund which contains the principal on which the interest accrued. Do you see my mouse hovering on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to show you, if I can get it open, this document. I said I would include it on the next slide, but I didn't have enough time to add it into PowerPoint. These are all the funds that are currently being redirected to a general fund. Some of these, as you can see, don't belong to us. Some of these, per the departments that I've spoken with, should not be redirected. So the expectation that the CAO has that they are entitled to interest earnings is misleading, because they are not entitled to these interest earnings, and I am not bound by any state law to give those interest earnings. And in fact, once the officer making that deposit to that fund directed me that they want to keep that money, I am bound to let them keep it. I'd like to provide some clarification about the items listed as other issues. This is for the first bullet point. The increase in audit findings does not mean there was an absence of those identified weaknesses prior to being identified as findings. Auditors and accountants understand that weaknesses become findings when they cross an auditor's materiality threshold. I provided the board ample opportunity to course correct to avoid increased findings. To suggest that allocating one senior accountant, one accountant, and one senior fiscal assistant to the Auditor-Controller department in the course of 3 years would correct decades worth of bad accounting across all county departments and dependent special districts demonstrates a lack of understanding over this county's finance administration. The use of 25% when describing 3 positions misrepresents the efficacy of 3 positions when considering the distribution of fiscal staff across the entire county. The board might also remember that I notified them during the presentation of the 1819 audit that those findings would appear again, considering that the 1819 audit issuance date was too late into the year and there was not enough time to fix the issues. Perhaps that was forgotten when implying that my office should have reduced the number of findings with 3 additional staff. The evidence of that can be found in the video of that meeting, which I've linked there. Specifically, you can find it at hour 2, 26 minutes in. I'd like to provide clarification about the second bullet point within the other issues section. While I understand that outside agencies and special districts rely on my office to issue timely payments, there is an erroneous suggestion that delays in payments can be attributed to only my office. It is not the case that all delayed payments originate in my office, as we have found that delayed payments originate in the offices of other departments as well as special districts. I do not intend to scapegoat specific agencies, but will list examples if the board pushes me to do so. I am aware that a certain office and a certain supervisor have solicited complaints against my office from departments and other agencies, and I cannot find the productivity in that action. It is unclear to me how it is helpful to the county to continuously participate in a destructive campaign against my office. Despite the lack of support from certain departments and certain supervisors, I will share that my department is fully caught up with all special district claims that we have received to date, from both those that are dependent and entitled to our services, and those who are independent and are not entitled to our services. We have cleared a backlog of 1,400 invoices in a month and a half following successful trainings with our newer employees, and are now down to a queue of about 400 invoices. The oldest of those invoices was submitted to us in the first week of this month, putting us slightly over our standard 2-week turnaround time for invoice processing. We have consistently accommodated same-day and next-day payments for urgent rush requests. Our office is currently processing 2,000 plus invoices each week. We can accomplish more with more employees. I'd like to provide clarification about the third bullet point in the other issues section. The County Administrative Office does not have the authority to direct the actions of any elected office or department head. The County Administrative Officer or purchasing agent does not have the authority to implement deadlines or commitments on behalf of the Auditor-Controller. As such, the Auditor-Controller is not subject to commitments made by the CAO to external agencies about the timeliness of completion of duties of the Auditor-Controller. Perhaps it will alleviate the CAO's apparent frustration if they cease making commitments that they cannot guarantee will be upheld. It is also important to note that the County Administrative Office might help the Auditor-Controller in accommodating to timeline commitments by providing documentation such as invoices, contracts, or claims to the Auditor-Controller in a timely manner and not after those 30 days may have passed. The staff report mentions specifically that some events have occurred since my arrival at the county in 2017. I will use this opportunity to highlight other events that have also occurred in the Auditor-Controller Department since my arrival. The good news is that the Office of the Auditor-Controller has made great strides in improving its operational deficiencies consistently since 2017. Below and on the next slide is a list of some of the improvements we have made as a unified department. We are now able to process all of our work electronically and no longer rely on paper processes because we are maximizing our use of modern software and investing in technological trainings for our staff. We eliminated several bottlenecks caused by routing invoices for payment to the County Administrative Office by offering direct pay services to departments. We have enabled the county's ability to comply with record retention requirements by offering electronic storage of documents within our financial software. We have built import templates that allow us to create entries for and issue payment for hundreds of payments at a time, whereas before, the office could only process one at a time. As a side note, I will mention that it is because of those templates that we were able to issue the hundreds of CARES grants all at once. We are now able to issue electronic payments to employees and vendors because we built upon our relationship with the county's bank to utilize services that sat unused for years, thus yielding more value for the public's dollars. We have successfully trained 100 plus employees from other departments over the past 3 years on financial operations and improvements that have yielded great efficiency results for their departments as well as ours. We have protected public funds by enforcing contract policies that reduce the number of unauthorized payments from leaving the county treasury. We have ensured transparency for the public by requiring full backup and substantiation for all proposed transactions that move county dollars. We have increased transparency for the public by updating the county's chart of accounts and use of descriptor object codes to demonstrate what county dollars are actually spent on. We have protected the county from litigation by enforcing federal and state mandates that require full compliance with regard to claiming for federal and state grants. This is an ongoing task dependent upon adequate levels of staffing for monitoring and maintenance. We have offered electronic submittal of payment claims to all special districts to alleviate their paper and postage costs while also reducing the delays resulting from postal mailing. This is a task that can be improved upon if adequate levels of staffing were met. We have held true to our mission of accountability by holding firm on regulatory compliance and addressing issues that threaten our ability to remain compliant. We have improved accountability within our own department by maintaining detailed daily time logs that demonstrate completion of tasks and areas for improvement. We have easily transitioned to a virtual Zoom office due to our preparedness efforts following the first public safety power shutoff back in October of 2019. We invested in laptops and converted our records to electronic format, which allowed us to adapt relatively quickly to remote work during the shelter-in-place order at the beginning of this pandemic. We have educated ourselves on our financial software enough that we are able to troubleshoot with departments and alleviate a bit of the demand on county IT. We have learned how to run some of our own exports, and we have a better understanding of how the different modules within the system interface with each other. As a department, we are working in a teamwork model. This allows us to cross-train and troubleshoot issues in real time. We believe we can accomplish much more and modernize many processes that will benefit the county as a whole. All we need is adequate staffing to do so. Thank you for the opportunity to address all of the issues in a public forum. I wish we could have done it sooner, though definitely with more advance notice for preparation. My team and I are looking forward to hearing your ideas for improving this organization's operations. I would also like to share with you, Chair Fennell, that my staff is present here and they are here as panelists. They would appreciate the opportunity to have a platform to speak directly to you, to the other supervisors, and to the public.
Thank you. I will say, however, Ms. Paz-Dominguez, that you have laid out a number of very, what I would call confrontational statements. And so I'm going to be asking for some of the people that you have made those statements about to respond.